Thank you very much for joining us today for this workshop on designing sculptures. My name is Liv and I work in the recruitment and outreach team at NUA, and I'll be here throughout this session today just to make sure it runs as smoothly as possible. I'll be handing over very shortly to Kaitlin, who'll be running this workshop for you, but we do have some house rules just to go through before we get going today. First of all, we'd be really grateful if you could please ensure that you keep your audio and video muted for the majority of this session today. There will be moments, particularly at the end, where we might like to see your work and see how you've got on throughout the workshop. At those points, if you're happy to share your work, you can let us know just by typing yes into the chat, which is at the bottom of your screen, and we'll then facilitate giving you permission to share your audio and video. Do please make sure that there's nothing inappropriate in your background or anything that gives out any personal information about yourself. We will be recording today's session, so please don't worry if you have any technical problems. You won't miss anything because we'll be making the recording available to you afterwards. It is, however, worth bearing in mind that if you do share your video at any point during the workshop today, that it will be included in the recording that will be circulated. If Kaitlin has any technical problems, for example, if Caitlin's internet connection drops out, we'll try to reconnect for around 5 minutes before abandoning today's session. Our apologies in advance if that happens, but as I've said, we'll send out a recording and then you'll be able to complete the workshop in your own time. As you may have noticed, we will have the chat open for today's session, but ask that you keep your messages in the open chat and don't try to message another participant privately. Also, it's worth noting not to give out any personal information either over the chat. If you see or hear anything inappropriate, or you have any questions or concerns about the workshop or your situation at home, please don't hesitate to send me a message privately. I'll be on hand to help and assist you throughout the workshop. There's one last technical thing I'd like to point out before we get going, which is that when we get into the making element of the workshop, you might like to click on the 3 little dots at the side of Caitlin's second camera. So you can see Caitlin's little thumbnail of her and then the one that she's helpfully waving at. You might like to click the 3 little dots and then pin video. And what that does is make that image the bigger image on your screen. So you'll be able to see and follow along with what Caitlin's doing a lot more easily, hopefully. But otherwise, that's it from me. And I'll be on hand on the chat and also back on screen if you need me throughout the workshop. So over to you, Kaitlin.
Okay. Hello there, my name's Kaitlin Ferguson and I am a professional artist. I studied at Nua between 2008 to 2011 on fine art. I would say I started as a painter and then kind of ended up as a sculptor. And then it's through that I've kind of built up my career creating public sculptures and designing sculptures for all different sites and locations. Recently I've just completed my master's at the University of Edinburgh on a course called Art, Space and Nature. So my practice is really about the environment and how art and the environment meet. So today we are going to be having a go at designing sculptures and we're going to be building a maquette. Now maquette is an exciting word and it basically means model. And it's what sculptors, but also architects, interior designers, graphic designers, interior designers, all different creatives use models as a way to test out ideas, to play with scale and to kind of figure out any problems before things are built on a much larger scale as well. So yeah, we're going to do kind of step by step during this workshop. So initially I'm going to show you some images of my work and show you the process that I go through. I'm going to talk you through some key considerations for designing sculpture and then we are going to get making. Okay, so I'm going to jump into my presentation now. It says host, disabled attendee screen sharing. You are now co-host. Okay, sorry, you're going to need a bit of editing there. Okay, so I am going to jump into our presentation. Fabulous, okay. Okay, so. So first of all, here is one of my most recent public sculptures. and it's a piece that's called Lithos, and it was built in Portugal, and it's a site-specific sculpture in a sculpture park in the forest in kind of central Portugal, which is called Poldra Sculpture Park. And this work was in collaboration with another artist who I work with called Natalia, and it's called Lithos because that's kind of the ancient word for stone, and it's a lithophone. So that's a kind of giant ancient instrument. So each one of these pieces of granite can actually be struck and played, and each one of the bits of granite creates a different sound. So this is an artwork that I designed that you could, you don't need to have a background in art to kind of enjoy it. You could just pick up a stone, a stick, and go along into the forest and play it. So yeah, this is a work that I built last year, and it's kind of, it shows that I like to create sculptures that kind of connect with the environment and get people to connect with nature and natural materials in different ways. Okay. So this one, it was one that was a little bit more close to home, close to Norwich, and it's called Wave Maker. And it was commissioned and built at Wells next to the sea on the North Norfolk coast. And it's a kinetic sculpture, which means it moves in the wind, so it spins. And as it spins, it creates this kind of spiral shape. And it took inspiration from the movement of waves across the coast. And it was a really exciting sculpture to make. But in the process of designing this, I was on the day where there had been an open call, and I wanted to put in an application, but I just could not come up with an idea. And I was actually playing with some materials in the kitchen when inspiration struck. And I came up with this idea playing with a sushi mat. So I was just twisting and contorting it, and it created this beautiful spiral shape. And these are images and kind of initial sketches that I proposed to the commissioners to say, this is what I want to build. And amazingly, they had a total leap of faith in me, and they went for it, and I created Wave Maker. So that goes to show you that, you can just play with materials around the house and be able to create some really powerful sculptural ideas with them. So when we are kind of designing public sculptures, we've got to think about some kind of key considerations. So when I kind of create sculptures, sometimes that might be creating one for my own practice. I might see an open call on the internet, or perhaps a kind of cultural organisation might contact me and say, we want you to build something. And regardless of the process, this is the kind of place where I start. First of all, I think about the location. Is the site where it's going, is it urban? Is it somewhere there's going to be a lot of people, a busy environment? Or is it going to be somewhere more natural, more rural, where people will need to go on almost a pilgrimage to get to it? And both have really powerful experiences for the audience, but an audience will come across those in different ways. You want to think about size and scale. So think about the size of your sculpture, but scale is about thinking about the size in relation to a person. Is it something that's going to be taller than your average human, or is it going to be intimate on the same level? And next up, thinking about perspectives. So by perspectives, we're thinking about looking at your sculpture from every angle. You don't know which way an audience is going to come across the work, so you want it to be just as powerful from all directions. Next up, you're going to be thinking about materials. What's it made out of? And also what's the base, or wherever it's going to be positioned, what's that going to be made out of? And a connection to that is, what's the environmental impact? All the time I'm trying to think of ways where I can make my works as environmentally friendly as possible and try and decrease carbon footprints. As I kind of mentioned before, audience. Who are your audience? How are they going to come across it? Do you want them to interact with it? Do you want them to touch it or look at it at a safe distance? And lastly, what's the title of your work, and how much information are you going to give the audience? Some works just have, are just left in the environment. Other works may have a text panel explaining. So it's how much you want to kind of give the audience. Great, okay, well next up, I'm going to get you to start thinking about your own sculpture. So starting point, I'm going to get you to choose a location for your sculpture. Now, these are images of Norwich and Norfolk, but they they represent general locations. And for this activity, you could choose anywhere, regardless of kind of where you are watching this workshop. You could choose somewhere in a city. So this is the Forum in the middle of Norwich. So you're thinking of an urban environment with lots of people. Perhaps in a park, so somewhere that is a little bit more natural, but you're likely to still have a lot of people engaging with the work. Perhaps somewhere like a train station where you've got a lot of people passing through, but they may not be there especially to see an artwork, but you may surprise them with the work in that location. Or lastly, somewhere perhaps a little bit more rural, by the sea, by a lake, and this is Whitlingham, which is a kind of nature reserve just outside of Norwich. So first of all, choose your location. So if you've got a pad or a piece of paper to hand and some sketching materials, perhaps you want to jot down your site. Okay. And next up, I'd like you to think about your style as an artist. Now, as artists, like your sort of style that you're known by, that can sometimes take years, decades to develop. My work across kind of all my portfolio is quite varied because I kind of design for a site. But you can kind of begin that process by at least thinking about the general style you want your artwork to have. Perhaps it's abstract, so that's something that might not have a clear representation of something, but it is gives you the essence of something. So the top left here, we have Barbara Hepworth's Family of Man, which is displayed in Suffolk. And what's nice about this is it has holes in, which are kind of viewfinders to the landscape. Perhaps at the top right, you might want to take inspiration from nature. This is Maggie Hamlin's Scallop, which is also on the Suffolk coast. And it also integrates text, which I think is really beautiful as well, and as a way of looking through. Bottom right, we've got an environmental sculpture or land art. And land art is was kind of from the 1970s and 80s, an art movement that inspired me a lot actually when I was at Nua. And this is a work by the environmental artist Robert Smithson, and it's called Spiral Jetty, using natural materials to create a pathway for people to contemplate nature as they walk. Or lastly, one of the most inspiring images for artists throughout time, and that's the figure. Henry Moore here, Reclining Woman, which is outside the Sainsbury's Centre in Norwich. And that again has you know, kind of almost semi-abstract sort of style, but you can clearly see it's a figure. Okay, so I'll let you choose your location and your style. Okay, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to come out the presentation and we are going to jump over to my other camera, which is the kind of aerial shot of my desk. So hopefully you'll be able to see that. Okay, fabulous. So you've got your location and your style. So what we're going to do is I want you to have a sketch through of what your sculpture could look like. I quite like drawing with pen, but you could use pencil or whatever you prefer to draw with. And you can have about 5-10 minutes to have a sketch. So you might want to use your piece of paper to sketch out a few rough ideas, or if you've got one clear idea, you could jump straight in. So I know that I want to create a work for a lake. I'm thinking about Whitlingham from the presentation, which is quite near my house. So I'm going to start by doing some rough sort of lines to represent the location. We've got the lake, we've got the sort of shore of the lake. And I think the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to think about scale. So I'm actually going to draw some stick figures just to give me an idea of what the sculpture is going to look like in relation to human figures. Okay, little family on a walk. Lovely. Okay, and now what I know is I want to create some kind of form shape that is going to come, that's going to connect both the shore and the water. And Robert Smithson's Spiral Jetty, I think, is such a powerful motif, and this idea of a spiral is a shape that is seen throughout nature. So I think I'm going to kind of take Robert Smithson as inspiration, but develop it further. And I'm going to create a 3D form that comes out that looks round and twists into and connects into the water. And then perhaps the water will rise above and below it. And as you can see, this is just a rough sketch You know, it really isn't about doing anything perfect. This is just about getting a few ideas on the piece of paper so that when you start using materials, you've got a rough direction. And that said, though, sometimes, you know, when you're sketching, you might not get ideas straight away. And it's not until you play with materials where I think other ideas can be unlocked. And so both are, you know, really are completely natural, reasonable ways to create ideas. And it's just about trying different things. And as I said to you earlier with the sushi mat, that was definitely a day I had an artistic block. And just having a play with things can really unlock ideas. Okay. So hopefully you can see my spiral form, which will come out of the water, and people will be able to look through a viewfinder into the landscape. Do some clouds floating in the sky. Okay, well, I hope by this point you've got a few scribbles down on your piece of paper and you've got a rough idea of the direction you want to go in. I'm going to keep talking through the next stage, but if you want to keep scribbling while I'm talking, that's no problem as well. So I'm going to move my sketch out of the way. So for making your maquette, you can use whatever you like, whatever you've got around the house. So I've collected some things that hopefully most of you should have at home. Some bits of cardboard. I've just chopped up some cardboard boxes from the recycling. I've cut one piece. This is about kind of 15 by 30 centimeters, but you can work on any scale you like. I've got some glue or tape, so just something that you're able to stick your bits of your maquette together with. I've got some bits of coloured card. You can also use kitchen towel or toilet paper tubes. I've got some kebab sticks here. You could use anything really, whatever you've got to hand. And the sushi mat is a perfect example of that. So first of all, I'm going to take my base. And I think really what it's about is creating, again, that sense of scale to start off with. So what I would encourage you to do is to cut a little bit of card and draw a figure on. You could also use, if you don't have any card, a post-it note, because they're quite good because they've got a little bit of sticky on them as well. But what you want to do is cut a little strip. This is probably probably about 1.5 centimeters wide, but again, you can work to any scale you want. And draw yourself, again, a little sketch kind of stick figure. Okay. I'm going to trim it down. And on your figure, you're going to create a little tab at the bottom, and that's just so that it can stand up. I'm going to use glue for mine. Okay, and I'm going to glue my figure down. So you can see straight away what that does is that gives us, again, just like the drawing, a sense of scale to respond to. Okay. Great. So I am going to get playing creating my sculptural model. I'm just going to start with some paper folding techniques, and what I'm going to do in a moment is on the other screen on the presentation, I'm going to put up some paper folding ideas for you if you're feeling a bit stuck. But if you have a clear idea of what you want to do, I say jump straight into it. So I'm just going to do a couple of bits on here first, and then I will jump onto the other screen. Right, so I'm going to do a bit of blue water for my lake's edge. And I'm going to use some card to create some kind of reeds. These maquettes, you know, it can be something that you can do at the very beginning of a design process to play out ideas, or it could be something that you come back to time and again as your idea evolves and develops. You might want to make sort of multiple models as your process changes. And then what I'm going to do, I'm going to grab some card. I am going to cut out some kind of spiral shapes, and that's what I'm going to use to create my sort of spirally vortex forms. So you can see just going simple spiral like that. And then I can fold off at the bottom and create a shape. And what I quite like about this is, just like my wave maker, it's quite springy and has movement. So perhaps your sculpture might move in the wind. So I'm going to keep on this process of spirals. And in the meantime, like I said, I'm going to jump back onto the other screen now. And I am going to leave you with some, or put on some images of some paper folding techniques. There we go. So hopefully you should be able to see the PowerPoint again. On this screen on the left and the right, to be fair, are all different techniques. So you can actually create a lot of really interesting 3D forms just using paper alone, you know, everything from a spiral, a fringe, to creating tabs to create kind of more stable 3D shapes. You can create folds, swirls, fringes, whatever you like really. So I'll keep making mine, but I'll leave that on the screen for you for a moment or so, just so you can come up with some ideas. And, you know, maybe if you've got you've got much more sort of naturally 3D forms, like the toilet paper tube or anything like that, you might be starting from a place of it being more 3D to begin with and kind of working across that. Other materials you can use around the house are, you could use wire, you could use old coat hangers as well, they make quite good. Good materials. I quite like using floristry wire, which you can get online quite cheap. It's quite thin and it's easy to use. That's quite nice for creating shapes. Keep busying away with my spiral form. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back out of the presentation and I'm going to go back to my aerial camera. So hopefully that's giving you some inspiration if you needed it. Jump back onto our original camera. Okay, so we are back to our aerial camera now. By spiral form, you can see how I've secured it a few different places. Put on one more spiral before I call it finished. I don't think my sticky glue wants to behave today, but all in the life of an artist, these challenges we face. There we go, and I think I might add a little bit more green. And yeah, with these models, it's something that you can experiment making at home. You can always take them outside to see what they're like in the natural environment. You can Photoshop or photograph them in different places, just to give you a sense of what they look like, really. Okay, well, this is my quick go at my sculptural maquette. So you can see I have my kind of springy spiral forms. I've got my person to scale and I've got a little bit of my kind of environment as well. Now, I had a go at doing this as well earlier, just to kind of test these ideas out. And this is one I've done that's a little bit bigger, that gives you a bit more scale. And what I was beginning to play with is I was cutting up toilet paper tubes as well. And they give quite nice kind of bit more kind of firm forms. But I was kind of noticing that they create some really nice shadows. And I think that's something nice to think about as well. So about how is your sculpture going to change during the day, different lighting, or perhaps over the seasons, or, you know, perhaps as the tide changes as well. And across different years, like how's your sculpture going to erode in the environment? How's it going to last? All of these really interesting considerations. Great.
So Kaitlin, we've actually had one question already about having trouble with inspiration.
Sure.
So someone has asked what was the starting point of your swirls? How did you come up with the initial idea?
Oh, for this sculpture, the maquette we're doing now?
Yeah.
Yeah. So for me, I was kind of thinking, it was actually this paper folding techniques page back on the PowerPoint. I really love the spiral shape, and that's really something that you see in nature. And I just thought that that would be a really nice way, a nice kind of natural form that could connect both water and land. And it also comes from my love of, I'm going to click back on the PowerPoint. Oh, sorry. Let me just jump back on there. If we keep thinking kind of Robert Smithson's spiral, it's so beautiful in the way that it connects both land and water. So I really wanted to take that concept and kind of develop it further. So I thought about spirals kind of moving from the land. So sorry about that. Let me just jump back onto screen share. There we go. Sorry about that. So yeah, kind of going from thinking about Robert Smithson's spiral connects land and water. So that's how I kind of took the jump for thinking about this spiral form. But obviously I didn't want it to look just like a, Robert Smithson, because that wasn't what I was trying to do. I was thinking more along the lines of something that was, to walk past it like you would a Barbara Hepworth here or the Maggie Hamlin. They're even bigger than the human sort of scale. So I wanted a sculpture that people could look up to in the landscape. So sometimes it's as simple as taking a kind of a feeling that you want your sculpture to have, or taking a particular shape. So you could just choose one of the shapes from this paper techniques page and let that be as an inspiration. So I hope that helps answer your question.
Thanks, Kaitlin.
So to create the kind of spiral 3D forms, so I've got a piece of paper here, a bit of card, and I'm going to do the same. I'm going to create a tab, and what I'll do is I'm going to draw and cut a piece of paper, sort of circle out, and then I'm going to cut the spiral all the way in. And following that. And it kind of reminds me of when I was making Wave Maker, and with the shape of the sushi mat, is that I kind of like the movement of the paper, and that's nice to think about. If this was a full-size sculpture, could there be a material where this could remain springy and perhaps move in the wind? It's a good thing to kind of think about. So I've got my tab. I'm going to glue that into the water of the model. Hopefully we can see, you can see that there. And I'm just going to kind of move that down. And that's like I say, kind of thinking about Wave Maker. That's why I ended up making a kinetic, and that means sort of moving sculptures, because I wanted something that engaged people, that had a bit of life about it. So I think there's something nice about sculptures that move and interact with their landscapes. Let's move that there. Okay, so let's cut some more spirals. I mean, I have collected some other materials like around the house. Like I say, I've got some cardboard tubes. Perhaps if I had a bit more time, I could cut these up, even if it was using a saw, and kind of making them into circular shapes and unfolding them up. I've got some wire, so I was playing with making kind of wire spirals. You could always incorporate those. And these are some sticks from kebab sticks from a barbecue. You could always tie these up and create shapes as well, just like that sushi mat. Okay, so I'll keep going with my maquette. I hope you are all successfully coming up with your sculptural models. And as Liv mentioned, we're going to have a little bit of time at the end that if you feel that you would like to share what you get up to, we would love to see. Like I say, it's a completely non-judgmental space of these are just quick playful experiments, but also you can, like I say, put anything in the chat as well of how you got on. Keep sticking down my spirals.
So Kaitlin, we've had another question from someone.
Yep.
I'm not 100% sure what they mean, but they've asked which area or aspect of your artwork is emphasized by yourself. So I wonder if they mean what area or aspect do you put your own stamp on the most? Maybe that's kind of how I'm interpreting it.
Say that again, sorry. So as in what's my artistic style, or?
I'm not 100% sure. I'll read it to you again and see how you interpret it. Which area or aspect of your artwork is emphasized by yourself?
I'm not too sure. Sorry for whoever's asked this question. Sorry, I'm not figuring out.
I have asked for more information, so if the person is still there, do send us another message. Try rewording it a different way, and I'll put it to Kaitlin. But I read it to be more which area or aspect of your artwork do you put your own stamp on the most? Like, what sets it apart as being individually your artwork?
I'm with you now. Yeah, fabulous. That's a great question. I think probably for me, what's most important is creating site-specific work and creating artwork that is about responding to the specific location. So, like I say, my work is about the environment. And it's really important to me that artworks that I make don't overwhelm the place. Oh, do you say something, Liv? Have you got another?
No, that I just had a message to say that's exactly what they were asking. So.
Fabulous. There we go. Teamwork. Right, I'll keep rambling. So for my artwork, it's really important for me that when I create sculptures that they don't overwhelm the place, they don't overpower the particular landscape. What I want my artwork to do is to help people connect with nature and to connect with places in different ways. And I want my sculptures to kind of sit alongside the landscape so that they help people connect without dominating. Because in my mind, I think there's nothing more beautiful than nature and the landscape itself, and the artwork should just sit alongside that. So I would say that being my ethos and my sort of driving force, I hope that all of my artworks kind of represent that. In terms of my artistic style, I don't know if necessarily they always look all like that. I think some artists, you can really tell their particular style all the time. My artworks vary because they're so site specific. And so for me, each artwork needs to just be about what the landscape needs. But also it kind of depends on when the process of doing these sculptures often is where you will respond to an open call that you'll see on the internet, and the people who are commissioning you might have kind of specific requirements as well. So the sculptures that I make, I don't ever make something prescriptive that just goes to a place. I create something for that place. I think that's probably my best way of, I hope that answers the person who asked the question.
I think it did, and also really interesting to hear about that, so thank you.
Yeah, definitely. I think kind of when I was studying and kind of coming out of art school like a few years ago, it was hard to know kind of what the process is out in the big wide world of, when you are a professional artist, and definitely kind of when you freelance and you jump from different commissions and different project briefs all the time. It's a really exciting way to work. All the time I'm choosing the projects I want to work with, and I can take on as much work and do what I want to and kind of decide my own direction. But it can also be kind of scary as well. But I just want to encourage people that, you can make a career out of it, and it's definitely potential for the future. So it is it's a really amazing career to be able to create these pieces for spaces, really. I hope everybody's having a nice time creating their maquettes. I think we've probably got about 5 or 10 more minutes kind of still making, and we'll keep talking in the meantime, and then perhaps we can save the last 10 minutes for if people want to share what they've made, and then we can always have 5 minutes at the end. I think we just need to do a kind of exit little chat, don't we, at the end, about just the last couple of bits of housekeeping. So I will keep making. Liv, do you like sculpture?
I love sculpture.
What? Going to put you on the spot. What's your favourite?
Barbara Hepworth. So I was really pleased when you had a little Barbara Hepworth in there at the beginning.
Oh, next week I'm going down back to St Ives where her studio is.
Oh, I love it there. It's amazing.
Oh, it's amazing, isn't it?
I just want to like secretly move in and hope that they don't notice.
So much, definitely. I find it such an inspirational space. So yeah, definitely, I can't wait to go back. And yeah, I mean, it's amazing to kind of be in that. You know, when you go to her studio, you can really feel her energy there,
Yeah.
and they've really kept it really beautifully, as if she had just walked out the door.
Yeah, and I think she is, for me, one of those artists, like you were saying, who you can just tell their artwork.
Yeah.
So she has such a distinctive style and feeling across all of her work.
Yeah.
And I think, so it was really interesting for me, and I hope everyone else, to hear what you were talking about and how you work in a very site-specific way. And I think something across all the sculpture that I enjoy, it is very much, it becomes part of a landscape rather than it dominating. So I found that a really interesting point and sentiment to point out to everyone.
Definitely, and like Barbara Hepworth for sure is one of my like four mothers. That's not the right word, but most inspirational artists to me. And Henry Moore comes from that, definitely that same sort of school of thought of, you know, natural materials can really be actually windows into environments and windows into potential ideas. Like Henry Moore and Barbara Hepworth would come on holiday on the North Norfolk coast here, and they'd get so much inspiration from the pebbles out at Haysborough and all these different things. And I love this story of Henry Moore. He used to collect ironstone pebbles here in Norfolk, and he would look at the pebble and see the sculpture inside of it and see the sort of human figure, and he would carve that out. And I think both Henry Moore and Hepworth have, you know, really used the landscape in really beautiful ways, and they both have kind of holes in their I mean, I'll flip back on the presentation.
And I think Henry Moore in particular, if ever anyone has the opportunity to go to his studio at Perry Green, that's so amazing. There's one particular building where they have a lot of his maquettes and all of these pebbles and found objects that Kaitlin has spoken about. And it's really amazing to be in that situation where you can see how an idea started, like very early inspiration, and then walk out into kind of the huge gardens that they have there, where there are many of his sculptures in the landscape.
Definitely.
So definitely recommend that as well.
Definitely. And with and here on the screen, the Henry Moore reclining figure. So this is outside the Sainsbury Centre that I also do a lot of work for at UEA. So this is also in Norwich, for any of you who are new to Norwich. And Henry Moore had a really good relationship with Robert and Lisa Sainsbury, whose collection was donated to UEA, and the Sainsbury Centre was built in their honour in the, I think it was 1977. Oh, sorry, that's my phone's running out of battery, but I think we don't need much more on that screen, to be fair. But yeah, so what I was going to say is kind of similar, that they house a lot of his sort of maquettes and pebbles and sketches. And if you see, he has these holes in his figures, the way that Hepworth does. And as I mentioned before, they're this idea of a viewfinder, of a sculpture sitting in a landscape, but, you know, helping us, you know, quite literally focus on aspects of the landscape, and there's an interaction at play between the form and the location, and for me that's most interesting. I guess that's the same with both of these, of Hamling Scallop. The text acts as a viewfinder, you know, and as does the way that, you know, Robert Smithson's Spiral Jetty, that invites a pilgrimage, a kind of walkthrough of a place, of a connecting. So like I say, I'm really interested when sculptures act as bridges to landscapes and ways to help people feel more focused and connected to nature without overwhelming that, and within the current context of, you know, climate change and a changing world, where artists, we need to be even more mindful of the materials and the processes that we're using. I think this approach of a sensitivity to landscape is needed more than ever, not just in art, you know, across all aspects of our lives, really. So art plays such an important role really for that.
We've also had another great question.
Oh, yep.
About whether you use craftspeople to actually create your sculptures. So for example, with the Portuguese one, did you physically make the sculpture, or did you kind of employ people to make it on your behalf?
So great question. Yeah, so it's a mix really. Both. This was made entirely by hand, alone, on my own. I used a wood merchant in Norwich and bought the wood, but I hand cut, glued, sanded every piece of wood. And then I had some amazing technicians that were part of the sculpture trail, helped me rig the sculpture and suspend it. So these masts are from old wherry boats that used to sail this part of the coast. So they helped me with the technical logistics of getting these. They're actually 6 individual components, but together they spin like a spiral. So I hand made those. In Portugal, so that was a mix. Natalia and I were there, so we were flown out there, and we had 2 weeks in a sculpt. The man who is the creative director, he had an atelier or a studio out there, and we were based in that studio for 2 weeks solid, and we built it alongside a team of technicians. So I hand cut every one of those stones with a grinder, with many, many grinding wheels. And in order to tune each one of these stones, the stones had to be, it's a millimeter difference. It's millimeter per note. So in order to tune it, we had to cut off with a hand grinder 1 millimeter of stone per time. But yeah, anyway, cut long story short, we tuned all the stones. So I did the stones, but Natalia and I had a lot of support with the physical install of putting the wood together. These are on stainless steel strings, so we had some support with the welding and kind of install. So it's a mix. I think probably the larger scale of my sculptures sometimes probably are more likely to use perhaps professional fabrication, and that means that you might employ a foundry to help you cast something, to help you weld something. It might be an artist who I know, he makes large-scale inflatable sculptures, so he employs a seamstress to help him with the fabrics. So definitely kind of the larger scale works you make perhaps may need a team of either technicians or professional fabricators. But for me, it's really important to celebrate anybody who has helped make a sculpture, because it really is a collaboration across a lot of really well-trained people in order to make something happen. So it's never just me on my own. It's with the support of some amazing people along the way that definitely I give as much credit for, I think, for the pieces. So it's probably, like I say, a case by case basis, but so far all my works have had my hand on most of it, I'd say. But that's a great question.
And also, I think that's where it's useful to point out that a lot of really successful artists have, as Kaitlin has said, a whole team of people, but they often have assistants working in their studio. So there's whole careers to be had there of assisting really, really successful artists. And we've had another question that kind of builds onto that, which is about how do you ensure the sculpture is safe? So I'm guessing that's where these technicians are so crucial and important.
So important. Yeah, I mean, really such an important question. So it has many different aspects. I mean, I think there's something to be said, and this is something I didn't touch on earlier, but I wanted to say that when you create something, I think in my mind, once I put it out into the public realm, I sort of let it go then, because once you've created your thing and you install it, and let's say that the people who've commissioned you are happy with it, after that it's in the public world and it's out there, and I sort of let it go at that point. It's not mine anymore. It's the place. It's for the people. So once I've created it and I know it's safe and it's out there, I kind of let it exist. So if it ever gets any and this has sometimes happened, if people have tried to break bits off it or do things to it, unfortunately I never take that kind of personally. That's just part of making public work. However, there's lots of things you can do to ensure it's as safe as possible. From a practical standpoint, you should always be ensure the people you're working for will always ensure that they've got insurance, but you have to ensure that your sculptures are as robust as possible so that they can take physical wear. not just from audiences, from people, but from weather and from the outside. For example, wave maker. So this image on the right, I would say the highest the person could reach is perhaps hit, this probably starts at 2 meters. So they were high enough that they couldn't be, I mean, without really trying to go for it, but they couldn't really be spun or played with. They were safely out of the way to protect people, and not to be sort of tampered with. All of these wires that keep it taut, they're locked in, so they can't be sort of tampered with. The same with these bits of granite. These are all welded in place, so they can't be sort of taken off and kind of played with. So there's something to be said that you can do everything you possibly can to make it as safe as possible, but perhaps someone with ill intent may still affect it. But like I say, that's part of sort of letting it go. So yeah, definitely those technicians, the people that you're working with, you know, everybody's on your side to try and make the thing you're making as safe as possible for everybody, really.
We've had some more great questions. We've had one about how to put forward a sculpture in your own area. So I don't know if you have any advice about that, Kaitlin.
Sure. I'm just conscious that the desktop camera, I'm just going to say before I answer that, this one, my battery on my phone's getting a bit low, but I just want to say that we're not going to need that anymore. So I've got my kind of maquette here to hand, and the one I made earlier. So what I'll do is I'll focus just on the other screen with the presentation on, just in case that goes dark while I'm talking. Yeah, so that's a fantastic question, really. I think it totally depends on where you are. So what I would say is, if you're kind of starting off and you know you want to kind of build a career doing this, there's something to be said for creating sculptures and perhaps taking them to places and photographing them in context in situ. So you can get some really great images to build up your portfolio, to share with perhaps future commissioners who could say, you know, this is what my sculpture would look like, you know, this is what I've done before. So even if you can't get you're not able to get a big commission just yet, you're able to get that portfolio imagery, because that's what people want. They want to be able to feel confident in you and your abilities. In terms of if there's an area that you think that is calling out for some public sculpture, I think probably safely as possible, find out whether that is private land or public land. Perhaps it's owned by, you know, your local council. Often councils will have a cultural board, a cultural sector, a forum that you could contact and say, you know, this is something I'm interested in doing. Is this available? Do you have any, you know, artistic briefs coming up? For example, if we're talking in the context of Norwich, the Norfolk City Council has what's called the Norfolk Arts Forum, and they have pots of funding available that you can contact anytime, and they'll help fund artworks. So that could be something. There might be a space near you that you could find some funding to kind of bring it all together. If you're looking for an opportunity that has already got the funding and the location in place, as an artist, I spend at least one morning a week, sometimes a full day, just kind of scouring the internet. So I, you know, follow a lot for opportunities. So follow a lot of, whether it's the Arts Council do newsletters, or I think there's loads of different websites you can go on just to look for opportunities and what's out there. I mean, that's how we found Lithos, that you can see. So spending a lot of time just searching, finding those opportunities, building up your portfolio. So when you're at the point of being able to propose something, that you've got images to say, this is what I do, this is what it could be like. And then if you're feeling like you want to get something off the ground, which is definitely a really good positive thing to do in the beginning of your career, reach out to who the landowners are and see if that's something that they want to collaborate with you, really. So it's kind of depends the place, but it can be done. Yeah, I hope that answers your question.
And we've had another question. I'm conscious time is getting on, but I'll ask you this one because I also want to know the answer, which is, have there been any works you've especially liked conceptualizing and making, and what did you like about it specifically?
Great, fantastic question. So in a heartbeat, mine would be Lithos, that you can see here. So that was a real leap of fire because Natalia and I had never well, we'd done a bit of collaboration on our master's program, but we'd never done a public sculpture before. But both of our artworks both of our practices are both interested in connecting with nature. So that wasn't too much of a leap. But where the leap was that we'd never made a musical artwork. And so that was a real learning curve. But that was the best thing about Lithos, is that, that sculpture meant we learned so much about music, about pitch, about tone, how to make, it's pretty crazy to think you can make stone create sound. But it was an amazing, this is a very ancient, they're thousands of years old lithophones. It's an ancient concept, but it was amazing to learn about that along the way. So we reached out with an amazing professor from a Californian university who actually makes lithophones in his spare time. And he has these amazing YouTube tutorials. And we ended up building a relationship with him, and he was sending us all the technical information that we needed, and we were sharing with him. And these sculptures can take you down a journey of learning about different areas that you didn't know about, and not just environments, different subject areas, like music, but they can also introduce you to some amazing people along the way. So Lithos was a real progression in following them a more musical sculpture, but with that was an amazing sort of learning experience. The way that I would say Wave Maker, that I'd never made a moving sculpture before, so I learned loads on the job in terms of what it takes to create something that can take weather, but can also keep moving, and not catch, and kind of stay kinetic, really. So yeah, each one has taken me on a journey with lots of learning, really. So I hope that's a good answer.
That was really interesting, thank you. And another interesting question. Earlier, you said you came as a painter and left as a sculptor about your time at NUA. How did you make that transition, and how did that come about?
Probably with a lot of headaches to my tutors, I would say, at the time. No, I don't really. I've always been interested in landscape, and when I was and at that time in particular the coast, and when I joined Nua, I was doing a lot of landscape painting, but my time at Nua doing my undergrad really helped me understand beyond just what an artwork would look like, thinking about its concept, and what's the message of your artwork, what are you trying to put across. And through my time at Nua, I got really interested in land art, which is, as I mentioned earlier, Robert Smithson and the 1970s. And what that group of artists, and also particular Nancy Holt as well, which is his wife, kind of also interested in this same idea of taking artwork outside of the gallery space, or outside of what is kind of called the white cube, and taking it into the landscape. So breaking the walls down of the gallery and putting artwork in the environment, because, and also from a kind of social political standpoint, that way it means that people don't have barriers to artwork, that anyone can come along and enjoy it, and that, it's not just about going to a gallery, which can be a closed off space. So the more I got interested in that, the more I thought about, I want artworks in place, in situ. And so naturally that then meant that I became more interested in how 3D forms could represent this ethos, this sort of set of thoughts, and what I was interested in. And so my paintings of the coast ended up turning into sculptures at those coastlines. So I made a work which was ended up being my degree show work, which is called Viewfinder, which is a set of metal frames that I installed at Haysborough on the North Norfolk coast. And for anyone who hasn't been there, that's a coastline that suffers from some of the highest rates of coastal erosion in the UK. And the village there is quite literally nearly completely gone into the sea. So I created these metal frames that were kind of viewfinders for looking at the dynamic landscape. And then I made an installation for my degree show that had those as projectors, but it was also had a lot of kind of installation that you walked into the room and you looked through a tiny aperture in the wall and you saw a sort of installation all about this. So it was through the deepening of my interest areas of concept, of place, of looking at, the artists who'd come before me, my time at Nua meant that, like I say, I originally was on painting, but my ideas took me in other directions in terms of materials. And I would say that I've now, that's a really important part of my practice now. I never say I'm a sculptor exclusively, or a painter, printmaker, because, you know, like I might have an idea that might want a different medium, and I'm not going to not use that medium just because I say I do one thing. So I kind of have retained that, you know, just recently through lockdown, I've started doing a set of zines, you know, and I do a lot of kind of printmaking. So I let my ideas inform the materials that I choose. And that ethos definitely came from my time at Nua.
Thanks, Kaitlin. That was really useful. We have had one question from someone about portfolio advice. So we'll also put a link in the chat, because we do have some general portfolio advice on our website. So we'll link everyone to that. But I don't know if you have anything a little bit more specific about what you do with your portfolio and how that grew over time.
Yeah, so for me, I think what's really I think that's my phone gone. But what I might do is I might just come out the presentation so I can see. I come out of that, and then, is that right? So you can just see me now, is that all right?
Yeah, perfect.
Everyone, if anyone hasn't seen my face. So I would say I'm going to just move my chair. So I would say for portfolios, my main kind of bit of advice is to make it specific to whoever you're showing it to, or the commission or proposal you're going for. So I have a set of works that I've made over the last 10, 15 years. And depending on the particular requirements of who I'm proposing to, I adjust that portfolio to be as specific as possible to match the things that person, whether it's an academic course, whether it's a potential funder, commissioner, whoever it is, you know, it aligns with them as much as possible. I think then that way you are making it as strong as possible, because you are making it focused. Probably some practical stuff, just ensuring you've got the best quality images that you possibly can. Images that are, you know, highest resolution, perhaps if it's a sculpture, offers different angles. If you're able to ever do video, so you can show someone the different perspectives, I think that's really great as well. I'm just thinking, actually, something that's just sprung to mind. When we proposed Lithos, we did something that we'd never done before, and we got some bits of slate in our studio in Scotland at the time, and we created sound clips. So we sent through digital technical drawings of what Lithos would look like, and, you know, and we had some scale images with figures, but we also sent through these sound recordings, and they were really lovely, kind of eerie, kind of listening to what stone could sound like. But that was really powerful for the people who ended up choosing us, because we were giving them a kind of multi-sensory idea of what our concept was, not just our images and our portfolio. They got a feel for an artwork. So I was going to say that, you know, you can be quite creative with portfolios in how you do them, because they can be an interesting platform for you to show your artistic voice. You know, there's lots of different ways of doing it. But yeah, keeping it as kind of specific as possible to who you're proposing to, but also be creative with how you do it. You know, there's loads of different ways, but just keeping it as best quality as you're able to do. And as I mentioned earlier, if you haven't got these big commissions, these big things in your portfolio just yet, that's no problem. Show sketches, show maquettes, show works in progress, you know, as well as those finished more artworks, because people want to understand your process as an artist as much as the final thing, because sometimes that actually is more interesting. So, you know, bring people in on your world and how you do things, I would say.
And I think that also comes back to our conversation about going to people's studios, so going to Barbara Hepworth's studio and Henry Moore, and the thing that I came away with from the Henry Moore studios was the maquettes. It was finding out about his process. So I think that really demonstrates how important it is for you to include that in your portfolios.
Definitely, and like that's why I wanted to share with you that sushi mat. You know, it's not the greatest image, and it's not. But that was like, necessity becomes the mother of all invention, as you know, like they say. And like I say, it wasn't until the ninth hour, whatever, where I was playing and that bit of material that I found in my kitchen, unlock something and took me on an amazing journey of Wavemaker. But that's just as interesting for people to see where it started as the final outcome. So yeah, embrace process is as important as outcome, for sure.
Great, thanks, Kaitlin. So I don't know if you had anything you wanted to sum up with, but also if anybody did want to share what they've made, I think now would be a great moment to do so. So if anybody is happy to, you can just put yes in the chat, and then we could facilitate you coming on screen.
Definitely. I mean, I guess, yeah, I mean, I think the set of questions were wonderful. So thank you, because that's really, I think, brought it all together again. To say that, like I say, just keep experimenting, keep playing, and be kind on yourself, that sometimes ideas don't come straight away. Lots of play can unlock what can end up being really significant works in your career. So I can see some yeses. So yeah, we'd love to see what you get up to. Please share.
On screen, first of all. Hi, Claire.
Hi, Claire.
Sorry, can you just see? I can't see myself, so I don't know what I'm showing you. Oh, here we go.
We can see you. So
it looks like you've got a lovely painting behind you. So
yeah, that was done at Nua by my brother.
Oh, Nua Yellows.
Oh, amazing.
Right. So I'm going to show you first of all Dulces, which is some hands coming out of the lake at Whitlingham.
Oh, I love it.
So yeah,
fantastic.
We've got birds on them, so it's just like this idea of being able to touch nature, I suppose. I don't know.
Love it.
You want to say anything about it, Dulce?
She's run upstairs.
She's run upstairs in shame. But
would she want it to stay springy so it moved in the wind?
Oh, what do you think? Dulcie! I'll ask her that when she comes back. And then over here, we've got...
Oh, sorry.
And then we've got this one.
Oh.
I think Eleanor said this was going to be in a field, and
yeah,
it was like an insight into her mind.
I love it.
That's what it's made out of an egg box, but I think it would be, could you walk in that door, Eleanor? Is that the idea?
Pardon?
Would you be able to walk inside that door?
Yes.
So would it be like a shelter for people while they were traveling through the landscape?
Yeah, I guess.
And how does it link with your mind?
I don't know.
I think that sort of tells you a bit on the top. Sort of.
I can relate to that. And then fabulous. Thank you for sharing.
This one is Haysborough Cliff.
Show this.
So yeah, I'm a bit obsessed with Haysborough as well.
Yeah.
So it's like the lighthouse melting into the...
Yeah, it's on its way, isn't it?
And it's sort of like just to carry on that whole conversation about, I've just spent so many hours looking at all the houses that have gone down, sort of going down the cliff and then plopping onto the beach. So that's that one.
I did a lot of experiments of rope coming off the cliffs as well, so I completely get visually where you're coming from with that.
So we've had a lovely time. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing.
Thanks, Claire.
Hopefully we can see everybody else's now.
Thanks, Claire.
And then I'll just bring Toby up.
Hi, Toby.
Hi. So this is mine.
Fabulous.
Wow.
Oh, no, everything's falling out.
Okay. Or maybe just pick it so they can. Lots of
Oh, Toby, I think your internet connection is not.
Yeah,
So-
again, so they can see the person.
I wanted to make like a big sort of metal tree.
I think we're losing you a little bit. I think I heard you say metal tree.
That's a shame.
Okay.
Oh yeah, I think your internet connection is not very good, Toby, but we'd love to hear about it. Could you write a little description for us
Yeah,
in the chat?
and I wanted to be coming out. Sorry.
Oh yeah, fabulous. Is that people at the bottom or smaller trees?
Yes.
I think we'll go with the description in the chat, but thank you anyway
Yes,
for
it's
saying.
gone now.
Oh.
Small trees. There's the person.
Great.
But from what I did see a bit, I really like the idea of a tree coming out of the trees and kind of looking up at a sculpture.
Okay,
I really love this foil little person I can see.
Amazing. And
Two
then
thumbs up.
Sophia, let's see if Sophia has slightly better internet connection. Let's give it a go. So I've just asked Sophia to unmute.
Hi, Sophia. So strange, because normally we'd all be in one room together and we could just look over at each other's. It's so strange.
How
Amazing.
do I change the camera? Ah, right. Okay. Sorry. Well, this is the concept art.
Yeah.
And like this is the idea for the sculpture. This is an actual place in my town.
Yeah.
The river floods every year, so the sculpture will be half swallowed by the river.
I love it.
And yeah, that's kind of it.
That's fantastic. And I love how that your artwork will change, not just in terms of the tide and every day, but will change across the seasons. Because Robert Smithson's Spiral Jetty that we looked at earlier, there's certain years, like, and it can be up to 5 or 6 years at a time, where the spiral jetty is completely covered and no one can see it. And then there's times where it's completely visible. So I love that your artwork would change depending on what time of year you viewed it.
I think Sophia may have gone, but that was lovely to see that one.
Thank you, Sophia.
So I think that's probably all we've got time for in terms of sharing work. But I can see Toby's just sent us a really interesting description of his work. And then we've had a couple of questions through. So we've had one about how your practice has changed over the years, Kaitlin.
Sure. Great question. I just want to say that, Toby, I read your description. It's really lovely. I was thinking about Angel of the North, this sort of figure kind of looking down and like creating shadows and stuff and looking up to view something. So yeah, thank you for sharing that. How's my practice changed over the years? Yeah, I guess like I say, from 2008 when I left school, went to Nua, like I say, it was painting, and now I'm really interested in artworks that, like I say, are in the public space so that anyone can access them. My practice has also changed. I've always been a maker that create things, but also I do a lot of participatory projects. So I work kind of, whether that's kind of in workshops like this, sharing how to make artwork, but I also work on large scale community projects with galleries such as like Sainsbury Centre and Kettle's Yard in Cambridge and all over really. But that is also artwork in itself, because I see working with people as a medium. So in those projects, that is a lot to do with connecting people with nature. And that might be me having conversations and supporting people. And that can be everything from a baby to, I've worked, I think, with a 103-year-old in a care home. So all ages. But that participatory projects, that ended up coming out of, once I had left Nua, I started volunteering and working in, it was at Sainsbury Centre and various places. And I realised that working with people is just as important as creating objects and things, to connect people with. It all comes back to the same concepts and ethos of connecting people with places. So I guess my practice has developed where I now have a lot of community projects I run alongside these public sculptures and these artworks as well. So my practice is completely changing, and I work in lots of different ways, but it all comes down to the same core, coming from the same core ethos and place, really, I would say. But I could bore you all day with images of my artwork, but I hope that's a way of looping it all up.
Great, thanks, Kaitlin. So if people, if you do have more questions, do pop them into the chat, and we will hang on for a little bit longer. And so, Kaitlin, you can kind of be reading those questions just while I go through some final bits with you. So I just want to remind everyone that we do have a huge number of workshops for you still to get involved with across the summer school. So if you're particularly into 3D making, you could also maybe join a workshop that we've got coming up using the free software Blender. So that's where, instead of making something kind of real in front of you, you could look at digital 3D modeling of a character. Or if fine art is really the direction that you want to go in, you could join our expressive painting workshop that we've got next week. So do take a look at the website and we'll link you to that in the chat, and you can see which other workshops of the summer school you might want to get involved and book your place on. As you will have seen by now, we are also offering the amazing opportunity to get your very own official NUA certificate. So this certificate is something that would be great to talk about, for example, in a UCAS statement, and also talk about in any potential interviews. So to get hold of one of these certificates, you will need to attend 6 of the 12 workshops that we're running, and we do want to see your outcomes from at least 3 of those workshops. And so I can see people have asked a couple of times in the chat already. You do need to send these outcomes to us by email at student.recruitment@nua.ac.uk. And these outcomes can be, for example, your maquette that you've made as part of this workshop today, or it could be a different maquette that you've made in the following week in response to sitting through the workshop. And then we also really want to see what you're making across the whole summer school. So if you're posting photos of your outcomes on Instagram, please do remember to tag us on @NUA Outreach, and we'll be sharing some of our favourites across the whole series. So a great opportunity to get a bit more exposure for your own work as well. Each week, we'll also be giving away 1 NUA Chili's bottle, and all you have to do to be in with a chance of winning one of those is to complete the feedback that we'll be sending to you by email at the end of each week. So there's 1 per week, as I've said, so lots of chances to win your very own NUA Chili's bottle. So as I've said, we are going to be here for a few moments more just to answer any final questions. So let's just have a look at the chat. I'm not sure if anything else has come through.
I have just had a private message.
Yeah.
It's Trisha? If I have mispronounced your name, I'm so sorry, because people have been mispronouncing my name for years. So sorry, that's my best attempt. She's just asked me, can your art be called fine art, commercial art, or craft work? I suppose it depends totally on the context. It can work in different ways, but I think probably technically it's a fine art because it's an art work that kind of sits either within the public space or within an fine art context of a gallery, say. Commercial artwork, there are parts of my practice that I do try and sell, whether that's prints or smaller sculptures, and I guess them in a way they are also commercial art as well. And then I guess craft work, perhaps there's elements of my work that sometimes are more sort of craft based as well. So that's the exciting thing about art, is that you slip in and out of all different categories, and it's all about, so that's why I tend to say interdisciplinary, because that sort of was a good umbrella really. So yeah, can sit anywhere really. But yeah, thank you.
So we'll just stay online for a few moments more for any final questions. But I'd also just like to say thank you to everyone for taking part and for sending in so many amazing questions. I've been really impressed by the questions that everyone's been asking today. So a big well done to everyone for taking part.
Definitely. Yeah, and I just want to mimic that and say thank you too. It's been a total pleasure. Because like without your guys' engagement, it just would have been my voice for an hour. So thank you for such thoughtful, sensitive questions that totally, I think, really made this even better for that discussion. So thank you.
And then someone has asked, which I can see my colleague Sam has already answered in the chat, about whether you could send your outcomes all together at the end of the summer school. And that is fine. And you can absolutely group them together at the end. Just make sure you've labelled which is from which workshop, so we can see it's clearly 3 different outcomes. And I've seen we've got a question about, is ceramic acceptable? If that's in terms of an outcome, absolutely. I'd love to see your ceramics. Please send them in. And yes, absolutely, more than 3 outcomes would be wonderful. We'd love to see them all. And then one thing I would say, if you're sending them to student recruitment and say you don't have Instagram, but you'd love the opportunity of being shared on our Instagram, you can also note on there whether you're happy for us to share it. But by all means, send more than 3. We would love to see them. Lots of lovely thank yous.
Oh, that's wonderful. Made my day. And good luck, everyone, in your future art careers.
Yeah, good luck with those portfolios. Lots of portfolio questions. We do also have a portfolio talk that we deliver. So if that's something you're interested in, you can always note that in your email, and it might be that we could send you a recording to that, or you could sign up to a future session specifically on that.
Well, thanks everyone for your thank you messages as well.
Great, so it looks like that's it for the questions. So once again, thank you everyone for joining us, and thank you, Kaitlin, for leading such an amazing workshop today.
My total pleasure. It's been lovely to make art with you all.
Great, so I'll end the session now, but thank you and have a great rest of your days.
Bye everyone.